Hello and welcome to this week's episode of We the People. My name is Corey Bradford. Thank you for joining us. First things first, I want to talk to you about an upcoming local event in the Anniston-Oxford area this weekend. It's called Noble Street Festival. Noble Street Festival will be taking place on April 2nd, this Saturday, in the Anniston area. It's an outdoor event. There's going to be a lot of live entertainment, live music, a lot of food vendors. And there'll also be a pop-up art gallery going on there that we here at We the People will exclusively be attending. So make sure you come out to Noble Street Festival this weekend, April 2nd, here in Anniston, Alabama. If you're here, it's going to be a great way to support the community. A lot of the proceeds and funds of that will go to the Calhoun County Relay for Life. It's going to be a good event, so come out and join us for it. Next things next, I want to talk about for some opening political news on the show. Congratulations to Senator Bernie Sanders, who this past Saturday, he won a total of 3 state primaries. He did a primary sweep, won 3 primaries. He won Washington State, Alaska, and Hawaii. However, you probably didn't hear anything about this if you didn't have a computer, because there was no coverage of Bernie Sanders' primary wins on any cable news networks this past weekend. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, none of them covered the Saturday primaries. None of them covered Bernie's wins. Now you ask yourself, why? Was it because it was Easter? Was it, were they taking a break from politics? Is this the reason? Well, one could think that. But a more obvious reason was the fact that every primary that took place this past Saturday was actually a Democrat primary. There were no Republican primaries taking place. They were all Democrat primaries. Alaska's already had its Republican primary. I believe Hawaii has as well. Washington has not had his yet, but these were not Republican primaries. They were all Democrat primaries. So because there was no Trump and no news of Trump wins, the media decided not to cover it at all. So congratulations to Bernie Sanders. My apologies on the behalf of the media for a lack of coverage on these wins. And also for all of you who are starting to see what's really going on here, please understand that Mr. Trump is a former member of the media. He worked for NBC for several years. It would be such a delight to people in the media to see a man of their own, becoming president of the United States. So that is why the media is pushing Donald Trump so hard, is mainly because of his connections to the media. I mean, if you think about it, he doesn't even pay that much money for campaign ads, because CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC just give him so much wall-to-wall, day-to-day coverage that he doesn't even have to pay for actual campaign ads to get his name out there, because all he has to do is say something ridiculous and it'll make the news and he'll go up in the polls. That seems to be the current formula in the 2016 presidential election. But congratulations again to Bernie Sanders, and we'll have a lot to talk about on this show about those events and many other ones. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back with more We the People.
As a startup, an existing small business, or a business looking to scale up, you'll run across this problem. What does my company need out of a website? My name is Joshua Shoemaker. I am a web developer that specializes in creating fast, modern, and responsive websites that can suit all of your needs, and to fit all screen sizes to reach everyone in your audience. If you are or have considered investing into an internal or consumer-facing website or application, then contact me today at joshuashoemaker@takethisstudios.com and use the subject line We the People promo for extended free consulting.
Alabama is well known for its beautiful nature and wonderful outdoor scenery. That's why it's up to all of us to help preserve the environment and nature that exists here in Alabama. Try not to litter. Pick up after yourself when you can. Adopt a mile. Do your part to keep Alabama looking like the beautiful state that it is. A message from We the People.
So I remember when I was about 6 or 7 years old, maybe I was 8, I don't really remember the exact age I was. I used to watch a lot of PBS after I would get out of school. Carmen Sandiego would come on. Only 90s children know about this show. This is Carmen freaking Sandiego. This was like an event. We were watching Carmen Sandiego, and all of a sudden, it's like a breaking news thing. And it's Bill Clinton at the time. Bill Clinton was president at the time. And the breaking news was about his affair. It was the moment when Bill Clinton was basically admitting that he did have somewhat of an affair with Monica Lewinsky. As a kid, I didn't care what he was talking about. I didn't care, about Monica Lewinsky. I'm just thinking, where the hell is Carmen Sandiego? Put that back on. What is this? It's kind of funny how American politics kind of goes in these cycles. You know, Governor Bentley here in Alabama having an affair or being accused of having an affair. It's just interesting because this just goes in cycles. I don't know what it is about Southern politicians. They cheat. You know, I don't think Southern politicians cheat on their wives any more or less than other politicians, but they just can't seem to get away with it. People got to understand is that these people are human. These people are human beings. They're not, you know, superheroes. They have character flaws, they have human flaws, they have personal flaws. I mean, the fact that Donald Trump is about to become the next president of the United States can prove to you that it doesn't take a whole lot to manipulate people into voting for you. It's a pretty simple thing, actually. All right, so we were talking about Bernie Sanders earlier on the show. Obviously, we are a fan of Bernie Sanders here on the show. But one thing about Bernie Sanders that scares a lot of people is that he has self-described himself as a Democrat socialist. And that word, socialist, what is socialism? For a long time in this country, socialism has been strongly associated with communism. So much to the point that a lot of people get the two philosophies confused. Now, though socialism and communism have a lot in common, and they do come from the same school of thought known as Marxism, they are two entirely different concepts, and they are used very differently in modern politics. So for this particular episode's educational moment, I decided to illustrate the difference between socialism and communism. All right, so first let's talk about socialism, because this is what Bernie Sanders describes himself as, and this is what so many people in this country are afraid of, a socialist president or a socialist politician being in power here. What is socialism? In essence, socialism in America and in European policy, in American and European political policy, socialism is the use of any public funds by the government to be used on things that will help benefit the lives of the people and will help, basically the use of public funds on people, basically. Whenever the government uses money that will directly be used on something that will be used by the public, it is essentially a form of socialism. Let me give you a few forms of socialism, just to give you an idea of what exactly this is. Right here, any type of public roads that you don't have to pay tolls on. That's a form of socialism because it's free for you to go on those roads. Those roads are maintained by government funds. Therefore, it is a form of socialism for you to be able to ride on those roads for free. So public roads, SNAP program, any type of WIC programs, any type of food stamp programs is a form of socialism. Now that is what people are afraid of. A lot of conservatives are afraid of, oh, you know, socialism is welfare and this kind of thing like that. Yes, welfare, food stamps, these are forms of socialism. This is true. The government trying to take care of people who can't seem to take care of themselves, that is a form of socialism, but that's not the end all be all to socialism. You also have Medicaid, Medicare. Medicare, of course, takes care of elderly people, and Medicaid takes care of the disabled. So these are forms of socialism. Social Security that you collect after you turn 65 and retire, that is a form of socialism. It's called Social Security. And student loans. Now, student loans is debatable as to whether or not that's socialism because, of course, you can get, you have to pay those student loans back. But if you've heard, and if you are a millennial like me, you know that nobody is paying their student loans in full. A lot of them are just paying a couple of thousand on it, and the government is settling its debts because there's literally so much student loan debt. More than $1.2 trillion worth of student loan debt has been accrued in less than 10 years. And so there's absolutely no way the government's going to be able to make anything, make a profit or make their money back on any of these investments. So they're just settling their debts with these kids for $6,000 on $30,000 loans and things like that. So it's ridiculous. But technically, student grants, Pell Grants, things like that could be considered a form of socialism. And then just public schools in general. Anytime you send a kid to a school that's a public school, that's a form of socialism. You don't have to pay money for that kid to go to that school. You know, all of those things are forms of socialism. So the big question is, how is socialism different from communism? So socialism versus communism. What is the key difference here? The key difference is communism is a state-controlled economy in which capitalism no longer exists. You can't make profit in a communist country. Now, you can to some degree. China is proving to be kind of a capitalist communist society. They're doing that combination. But generally speaking, the state controls the economy, the state controls business. It completely regulates the flow of business in a country. Therefore, profit is no longer a thing for the actual citizens of the country. centralized, very centralized government. It's usually a single party government. Wealth redistribution. Now, when we think of, welfare as wealth redistribution, okay, that is a form of wealth redistribution. But in communist society, there wouldn't even be a need to redistribute wealth because all the wealth would already be equally distributed. Basically, communism is a attempt at a classless society in which there are no rich, there are no middle class, there are no poor. Everybody is on the same level, economically speaking and even socially speaking. The key problem with communism and Marxism in general is that there is no principles in Marxism that can help maintain a government from getting too powerful. In every single instance, whether you're looking at the USSR, whether you're looking at China, whether you're looking at North Korea, whether you're looking at Cuba and Venezuela, in every single instance, communist countries usually give rise to government regimes that become autonomous, they become single party dictatorships, they become too powerful. Lots of atrocities are usually committed in communist societies. Now, is it that communism as a philosophy is so strongly associated with dictatorship or authoritative totalitarianism? That's not necessarily the case. There's no principle in Marxism or communism that says a government has to be brutal in the way it handles itself. However, there's nothing in Marxism or communism that protects against that either. So the problem with communism is that the government just simply gets way, way too powerful. That was what happened under Stalin. That's what happened under Chairman Mao in China. That's what happened under Kim Jong-un and all the other ones over there in North Korea. It just becomes too centralized of a government. Usually the militaries become extremely powerful and aggressive towards other militaries in the world. I don't know why these things are so closely associated with communism, but it is an inherent trait of communism. There's nothing in communist philosophy that says the government has to be a military dictatorship or a totalitarian state. It's just something that usually accommodates communism, and that's why we always see communism associated with those factors. But then again, though, the key message of this particular, segment is that communism and socialism are two entirely different things. And although they are related, what Bernie Sanders is talking about, where he's talking about expanding the safety net in this country, expanding Social Security, making college free for everybody, $15 minimum wage, which I think is a little excessive, but at least raising the minimum wage. These things are things that we already do. The concept of a minimum wage isn't really socialism, but that's definitely a form of the government regulating business in a way that a socialist society would do. So we already do a number of socialist things. We have been really since this country started, but definitely since the 20th century under, Franklin D. Roosevelt, even previous administrations under that tried these socialistic ideas and they have worked. The problem is the issue is we have to have a balance between socialism and capitalism. We can have a mixed market economic system in which capitalism is still key, but some forms of socialism are used, which that's pretty much what we already have. That's what the point I'm trying to make with this segment is that we already do that. We already combine socialism and capitalism on a daily basis here in the United States of America. China, which is mainly a communist society, is like the opposite of us. They're mainly a communist society, but they're also gradually getting into capitalism the way we are a capitalist society that is now flirting with the idea of electing a socialist or a Democrat socialist president. So please remember that there is a distinct difference between socialism and communism. Talk to your history teachers and your political science professors at college about it, because let somebody please explain to you, if I didn't do such a good job, about the difference between communism and socialism, because Bernie Sanders is not a communist. To call him a communist is inaccurate and just plain wrong. He's not a communist. He does, however, consider himself a Democrat socialist, which is not related to communism. It is a very different approach to government, and we need to be educated about what that approach is and not throwing, words around like communist. Communist, that's a very dangerous word. The world's been fighting about that word for the last 70 years now. So stop calling people commies. Bernie Sanders is not a commie. Bernie Sanders is not a commie. He's a socialist. There's a difference. So go tell your friends about it. We'll be right back with more We the People.
Let's talk about inefficiency and redundancy in government. And we could spend a long time on that. So we'll just narrow it down to Alabama. Now, a lot of people don't realize just how redundant and inefficient states are with things. So let's just reduce it to specifically state things. And by state things, I don't mean taxes and bills. I mean our state things like birds and stuff. The state of Alabama is so inefficient and redundant. We have 2 state birds. We have the yellow hammer and the wild turkey. Why? Why? Like, that's really why? Why do we need that? Why do we need 2 state birds? Was one not good enough? That is not even the most egregious example of government bureaucracy in action, though. For instance, our state butterfly is the swallowtail. However, our state insect is the monarch butterfly. What in the world, Alabama? Was the monarch butterfly not good enough to be our state butterfly? Or was the swallowtail not good enough to be our state insect? Why have both? This is just needless waste, and it's this kind of things that we really need to change about our state and about politics. Politics. Millard Fillmore. Now, that's not a name I just made up. That's the name of an actual president of the United States. Lucky number 13. You see, to become president, all he had to do was simply let the other president die before him. Which he did, ironically enough, after giving the longest speech that any person who's been inaugurated has ever given in a rainstorm while he was in poor health. So maybe it wasn't Millard Fillmore's fault, but who's to know? Millard Fillmore was a very lucky president. He was actually the last non-Republican or Democrat president. He did such a great job that he destroyed his own political party. He really did nothing of any impact, and he was named Millard. Did I mention that? So, yeah, Millard Fillmore. What can be said about Millard Fillmore? This is usually the part where I would give you a fun fact about him, but there's just nothing fun about the guy. He sucked.
Are you tired of the Republican Party and the Democrat Party? Do you think Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump both make suckish choices for president? Have you thought about libertarianism? Libertarianism is the best of both worlds. For conservatives, it contains limited government, laissez-faire economics, deregulation, self-determination, and the end of the welfare state. But for you liberals, it also contains right to privacy, civil rights, legalization of marijuana, among other drugs, freedom of religion, and a reduction in the military-industrial complex. Side effects may include uncontrollable capitalism, corporate fascism, interstate disputes, less military intervention, greater levels of economic inequality, and a possible return to segregation. Some users may experience a loss in social order. Reports of a significant drop in population due to increased free will have occurred. So go ask your local political scientists about libertarianism. Isn't it time you see what all the fuss is about?
Okay, so basically you hear a lot about, if you ever watch the news, you hear a lot about red states and blue states. And you may even hear the term purple states get tossed around. So what is a red state? What is a blue state? What does it all mean? Okay, well, first of all, to understand that, you have to understand the political spectrum. And I have a little drawing board of the political spectrum right here. Now, this is a rough draft of the political spectrum. This isn't a real astute version of it. This is kind of a very simplified version of it. And you really can't even see some of these words just because I've had this written on this board for quite some time. And as you can see, it doesn't even erase. So I've had it written, so I have to watch this board. But basically, the political spectrum is a right-left spectrum. To the right of it, you have basically conservatism, which is what the Republican Party currently aligns itself with. Conservatism, capitalism, things of that nature. You go too far right, you get into fascism, which is dealing with like a totalitarian government, very bad stuff. Then to the left of the spectrum, you get into liberalism. And liberalism involves some forms of socialism, and this is currently what the Democrat Party of America aligns itself with. So when you hear people talk about somebody being a leftist or going left to the spectrum, they're talking about Democrats. You go too far left, you get into the philosophy of communism. And communism, you get into state-controlled economy, state-controlled property, things of that nature. So really fascism and communism are just way too extreme for a standard society. In the middle is centrism, which is sort of kind of balances between these two powers. So when you hear people talk about red states and blue states refer to anything that falls left of the spectrum. We're talking about liberal states here.
They tend to vote for liberal presidents, liberal governors, liberal senators and congressmen, things of that nature. And red states refer to Republican states, states that tend to vote for the Republican Party, conservative candidates, things of that nature. So which states are red and which states are blue? Oh, good question. I got a little map here, and we're going to stick this map right here. We're going to talk about which states are blue and which states are red. Here's the American map. It's outlined all nice and all, blank, as we should be. We should all be on the same level. But we use politics to sort of kind of put ourselves in categories. So, what's a red state? Well, first of all, a red state is something like Texas. See Texas right here? Texas, very red state. Probably one of the most red states there is. They tend to vote for Republicans nonstop. There's a lot of Republican presidents who have come from red states. George W. Bush was actually governor of Texas. One of the current presidential candidates, Ted Cruz, is a senator from Texas. So when we talk about red states, Texas is as red as it gets. What's another red state? Well, the state we're in right now, Alabama. Alabama is also a red state. They tend to vote for Republicans. They tend to vote for conservatives in the state. This little area up here, this little area, all up here, all of that's red. All of that's red. Not that state, but everything else over here, red. All the Rocky Mountains usually be red. Arizona, very red state. All of the South, Tennessee, South Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi, Arkansas, all very red states. They all tend to vote for Republicans. Okay, well now, what's a blue state? What's a state that's voting for the Democrats and the liberals? Well, let's find out. The main blue state? This little state right here on the West Coast, California. Oh yes, California. I used to live in California. Very liberal, very left-leaning state. They tend to only vote for Democrats in California. New York City, also a very liberal state. What's another liberal state? Well, New Mexico is pretty liberal. They tend to vote blue. Colorado, right here. Colorado's neither. We'll get to Colorado in a minute. But Michigan tends to be blue. Illinois tends to be blue. All your northeastern stuff up here is going to be pretty blue. And so that's, your blue states. They reliably vote for Democrat candidates. Well, what about a purple state? You've heard of that before, right? People talk about purple states. Well, a purple state is a state that in a presidential election can go either way. They might vote for the Republican. They might vote for the Democrat. It just depends on the times and depends on the way the campaign is run. One of the biggest purple states there is, one of the biggest states that counts in a presidential election is this state down here, Florida. Florida is a very purple state. It is the state that has been the decider in many recent elections, most recently the election of 2000. What's another purple state? Colorado. We were talking about Colorado earlier. That's a very purple state. They go either way. Ohio. Where's Ohio at? Ohio, they're purple. They kind of go either way. Virginia's purple. And more recently, North Carolina. North Carolina used to be a reliable red state. They used to only vote for Republicans. 2004, they voted for George W. Bush. 2008, they voted for Barack Obama. So that's become a purple state. There are a few other purple states, but generally speaking, those are the main ones, and there are a couple of others. And any state can turn any color. Now, what does this all mean for you? Just because you live in a red state, that doesn't mean you can't get a Democrat president elected from your state. And just because you live in vice versa, let's say you live in a blue state, that doesn't mean you can't get a Republican elected. Give you a couple examples. Louisiana, in the deep South, generally speaking, is a pretty red state. They voted for many of the last Republican presidents. However, they just elected a Democrat governor. Here's another example. New Jersey. New Jersey is way up there next to New York City. Of course, it's going to be pretty liberal. And they're very liberal. They only vote for Democrats for president up there. Yet, their governor, their two-term governor, is Chris Christie, a staunch conservative Republican who is currently running for president. So that gives you this example that just because your state is either red or blue, that doesn't mean anything. Any state can turn any given time. We just talked about North Carolina. They turned for Obama in 2008. So don't think that just because you live in a red state, or even if you live in a blue state, that you can't get a president or anybody, a governor, congressman of the other party elected, because it's all about voter turnout. It's all about participation. And that's why I encourage everybody to vote, because you can make a difference with your vote. Don't let anybody tell you can't. That's the difference between red and blue states, and that was our educational moment. You know, here at We the People, we try to be very environmentally conscious. We try to be very aware of what's going on with the environment because there's a lot of disastrous things going on right now with the environment that a lot of people aren't covering. So this particular week, we decided to do a story about a growing concern for the environment that only a few people are talking about. And it is a very common, very, very simple product that is a household product that many of us have in our houses right now. We don't even know about it, and it's called Microbeads. It's used in a lot of facial scrubs and toothpaste and things like that, and it's becoming a growing concern for environmentalists. I talked to the We the People correspondent Mallory Wilkerson about this situation. Hey Mallory, thank you for being with us today.
Yes, thank you, Corey.
Now, what exactly are microbeads?
Well, microbeads are small spherical pieces of polyethylene plastic, and they're most commonly used in conventional toothpaste and mouthwash and other household beauty products as well, even in some cleaning products.
Really? Now, these microbeads, they go into our water supply. Can they be filtered out of our water supply?
Unfortunately not. Our water filtration systems here in the U.S. are not built to filter these tiny pieces of plastic out of the system. So either one, they're creating a massive buildup at the water filtration plants, or when they do get into any of our rivers, our oceans, or our lakes, it's, they're acting as little sponges. So they're soaking up chemicals and, all of this negative stuff in our marine life is looking at these as food because they're so small. And when our fish and our different marine life are ingesting those chemicals that have been absorbed into these tiny pieces of plastic are not only affecting the life of our oceans and our lakes and our rivers, but they're affecting our health as well.
Really? So what are some of the alternatives that a person can use instead of using microbeads?
There are tons and tons of different alternatives. You can make your own face washes and toothpaste, but also not only that, but there's also different brands that use alternatives like sand and brown sugar. Coffee grounds is an incredibly popular one, as well as apricot seeds too. And not only are those much less harmful to the skin, but it's a much more natural alternative and a better way to reuse our resources and give back to the earth.
Okay, wow. Well, thank you for that info.
Absolutely. Thank you, Corey.
Thanks. I want to thank you all for watching this week's episode of We the People. This was a good episode. I want to thank my correspondent Mallory for that microbead segment. I want to thank everybody who helped on the show this week. Last week, we had the honor of interviewing Democrat U.S. Senate candidate, Democrat Ron Crumpton on the show, and he was a great interview. Well, next week we have another political interview that is going to be really big, but we can't reveal that information to you until you tune in next week. So thank you guys for watching. You guys have a good night. I'll see you next week.